Anwita Ghosh. Anwita Ghosh, yes, next presentation will be by Anwita Ghosh. Yes, please.
Yes, please start.
Good evening, everyone. I am Anwita Ghosh, presenting my paper titled From Rolling to Scrolling, Transformation of Photography and Return to the Rawness in Digital Times. So, in this presentation, we will see how photography reflects how photography has transformed in recent times in terms of meaning, value, and emotional engagement. So photography is one of the many fields that has witnessed a significant transformation over time. The world has seen a drastic shift of photography from the domain of unapproachability to the space of everyday life. In earlier days, photography used to be an application of luxury, a very rare or an occasional activity. But now it has become very continuous, habitual, and almost unconscious. Today, nothing can escape the photographic gaze, be it a meal, an everyday moment, or an occasion, whatever be it. Nothing can escape that photographic gaze. So, situating the current photographic practices within a postmodern framework, this presentation addresses the rise of self-documentation, the breakdown of conventional ways of preserving memories, and the search of authenticity in an environment with excessive production of perfect images. With the rise of smartphones and social media platforms, photography has shifted from something we carefully preserved to something we constantly circulate. We no longer merely take photographs, we scroll through them endlessly. Here one might wonder, has photography lost its value because it has become so much accessible and so much affordable? Or is the value changed rather than diminished? Another noteworthy aspect of photography in contemporary times is that even in an age of extreme perfections, filters, and digital manipulation, why do we see a growing interest in older forms of photography, such as black and white images, film photography, and visible imperfections? So before the era of this technological saturation, photography functioned within the gamut of limitations and occasionality because of its inaccessibility, physical storage capacity, and processing cost. By the photographs, we used to keep the records of our significant moments of life, like such as travels, family functions, and achievements, etc. So, in short, photography worked as a practice of preservation. I'm not saying that today we don't use photography as a practice of preservation, but the digital age has expanded, has amplified its type of use and consumption. So, this change in the digital era leads photography to become an medium of acknowledgement, validation, and recognition. Platforms like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube act as different channels that uplift photographs into social and cultural objects whose value are measured by likes, views, and shares. So, as a consequence, in the economy of instant circulation and instant interactions, the form of photography has been transformed from an aesthetic of emotional depth to a matter of immediacy. So here I briefly refer to Roland Barthes, particularly his work Camera Lucida. So Barthes, we all know that Barthes introduces in Camera Lucida two important concepts, that is studium, which refer to the cultural, social, historical meaning of a photograph, and punctum on the other hand is a detail that emotionally pierces the viewer, often intentionally. So one famous example is a photograph of Louis Pine. Louis Pine was a conspirator in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and this photograph was captured by Alexander Gardiner. So Louis Pine was in custody at the time of the photograph. So Roland Barthes refers to this photograph while discussing the studium and punctum. He notes that in this picture, the studium is the aesthetic quality, that the boy is handsome, but the punctum is the knowledge of his impending death. So in terms of punctum, Barthes says the punctum is he is going to die. So it is something that pierces the audience. So today's digital and social environment, Roland Barthes' idea appears both relevant and challenged. The studium is often amplified through captions, hashtags, filters, and algorithmic visibility, while punctum has become kind of unstable because in contemporary images, emotion is curated, spontaneity is staged, and intimacy is often engineered for visibility. This does not mean that punctum does not exist, but it often emerges very differently, sometimes delayed, diluted, and sometimes simulated. So the transformation of the meaning of photography can be noted in one of the most significant practices in contemporary time, that is the fashion of documentation. Earlier, the people are seen capturing the surroundings by situating themselves as the perceiver or the observer of a world. But this world-oriented documentation has been transformed to self-centered images in contemporary times. Nowadays, people are often seen positioning themselves not in the place of a perceiver or an observer, but in the center, where the world serving as a backdrop or as a contextual frame for the presentation of the individual, thus prioritizing being seen over capturing the moment. This transition has democratized photography, blurring the boundary between the photographer and the subject, as Joydeep sir has mentioned it earlier. Therefore, the meaning of photography has morphed into a proof of participation nowadays, rather than documentation of the world. And as a result, this constant circulation and interaction on internet contribute to a sense of visual lethargy and a need to be seen rather than felt. So we are almost at the end of the presentation. Here I would like to bring a paradoxical aspect in modern times. That is, despite this proliferation of digital photography and modern trends, there is a rising fascination towards the old, imperfect and black and white images. So this return to the rawness in the period of saturation seems a bit opposing. So here a question arises that in this world of color, perfection and vibrancy, does this return kind of suggest a sense of honesty, authenticity among the imperfections? However, this return can be interpreted as an escapism from the aesthetic burnout of the perfection in a culture that is made significant by visual exposure and recognition. This interest towards looking back at the rawness reflects a sense of resistance to an over-polished quality of the image, quality of the photograph. So these are some transitions that brings photography in the postmodern landscape. So what postmodernism does is, postmodernism questions the grand narrative, the objective truth, the fixed meanings, while welcoming the subjectivity of the lives laced with multiple expressions. In postmodern context, photography can be understood from different angles, where the conventional space between the high art and low art has been blurred. It is no longer rigid. From this view, photography no longer remains in the space of limitation, but rather it is very accessible to the mass. And the art that were previously considered as too pedestrian for the serious art are also being valued these days. So in this process, it becomes a documentation of everyday life embedded with mundane and ordinary fashion. To conclude, the change that photography has undergone, the transformation that has happened, that does not articulate that photography has lost the value completely, rather it speaks to the continuous redefinition of its role. Through its use and consumption, the value of photography is constantly being negotiated. Contemporary photography redefines the dimension of preserving memory, representing selfhood and identity, and preserving the world by confirming social facilitation and visual prominence. Therefore, one can say, photography does not mark an end in the preservation of memory, identity, and life, but rather it indulges in a kind of adaptation of rhythm that tries to fit in or tries to fulfill the demands of our modern life. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ghosh, for your deliberation. Any question from the floor? Yes.
So in one of your slides, you mentioned is what called aesthetic burnout of perfection. So you mean to say that due to the digital era, aesthetics is slowly dying out, and in the analog era it was there? Could you please clarify on that?
So I'm not saying that the aesthetics are dying out, but the overconsumption of the perfect images I'm saying about. It's very perfect, the world is very perfect, visually very pleasing. So in that, it becomes very saturated. So in that age of saturation, the return to the imperfections or return to the black and white seems more human. In the age of perfection, the imperfection seems more human.
But in digital black and white, and you can still have art photography, right? So I'm still not being able to understand why analog photography is being labeled as art and imperfection. Why? I'm not against analog photography, but I'm just trying to understand why there is a general conception that in digital aesthetics is, why using the word burnout? It's a serious, it's a very scathing attack on digital photography. I'm not for or against, but I'm just trying to understand. So is digital photography destroying or burning out aesthetics?
No. By the burnout, I'm not suggesting any kind of like that, but I'm saying the aesthetic lethargy, the visual lethargy that is coming out from the very visually perfect images. So by the word burnout, I meant that. It's a kind of a lethargy.
Yes.
I would just like to clarify what probably Anwita tried to say, and that is that in this digital era, everyone, whether I'm a photographer or not, I can produce certain a degree of an image which is to some extent acceptable to everyone. If I just depend on the raw settings of the camera, on the auto settings of the camera, I can produce something which is presentable. And everyone today is a kind of a photographer. Whereas in the pre-digital era, I would suggest that you need some effort, we needed some effort. Just as today it is very easy to produce anything, everybody can sing if you have a software behind you running. But earlier it was not that easy. So naturally there is a tendency, obviously, and this was being referred earlier in the earlier discussion as well, that we are going back to the past. And this is, and I'm also, Imadrida, with your permission, I'm just referring to the earlier debate. It's not about what exists, what does not exist. I think everything exists. Technology will be there and technology will replace things, there is no doubt about that. But it does not replace completely. And everything, for example, yesterday we were having discussions about painting being replaced by photography. There was this fear. Obviously, painting never got replaced. Painting is still appreciated, and it will be appreciated in future as well. So every form of photography. So even I think when color photography first came, people were shouting what will happen to black and white photography. But black and white photography survives to this day, and it will survive. So similarly, everything that will be changing, the digital era is one era, the AI is the coming era. So these technological advancements will take place, but side by side there will be maybe limited level of acceptance. The price concern is another point. That is another, obviously a very thing. Certain things are not consumable by all of us, but for the persons who appreciate that remains. And obviously for the artists that remains, because many of us are into that. We enjoy the process of creation rather than the product of creation. That's all.
Thank you, Joydeep, for your illuminating version. And there is a Ashinda, one hand was raised somewhere. Mr. Simon was thinking the question.
I think I was usurped. The same thing was said, but just to reiterate, I think that because, as we all have smartphones now, and everybody's a photographer, photography is being democratized. I don't think that the advent of digital has created fewer photographers. It's just that we're now more diluted with people who take photographs but aren't photographers. And I think the requirement there is for us as photographers, for members of this organisation and for others around the world to become better photographers, to make sure that distinction is between us as image makers, as photographers who are capturing images of the world around us, to those that are using image making or photography, if you want to call it that, to just record their own lives and purposes. I think both can exist mutually, but it puts a greater emphasis on our expertise and integrity as photographers. So I think that was what was said in different words by different people. So I quickly pulled my hand down, but somebody was too quick, saw it in the air.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Mr. Simon has put that there is an assurance of all of us being better photographer. So that is the positive side of it. And okay, yes.
I want to mention here something that Joydeep sir has mentioned one of his classes in our college, that what is postmodernism. So postmodernism is something like a spider web without the spider at the center. So there is no center. So there is no hierarchy. The hierarchies, the boundaries has been blurred in the postmodern. It has been democratized day by day. So that's all.
Yes. Yes, this will be the last question of this deliberation. Okay.
Well, thank you for your brilliant deliberation. Can you please spare a word or two on the Barthesian notion of punctum?
So, Barth here in the camera lucida, Barth introduces two concepts. One is studium and one is punctum. Let me just. So you can see the picture. Studium in the picture. Studium is that the boy is handsome. Is the aspect we can. Studium is the aspect we can understand very from an intellectual level, and punctum is the aspect that emotionally pierces the audience. The studium in the picture is the fact that the boy is handsome, and the punctum is the knowledge of his impending death. The punctum is he is going to die. So it's the emotional, it's often accidental, it's unintentional.
Somebody has to know that he is going to die, right?
But you can say that he's very sad.
I see. I got it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ghosh.